Hello, this is your host, Richard Thornton, coming to you from Georgia's beautiful Nacoochee Valley. Join us today on a tour of what I consider the most beautiful state in Mexico, Michoacan. It is the winter home of the monarch butterfly. Its mountains look remarkably similar to the southern Appalachians, but because Patzcuaro, Michoacan, is at an elevation of 7,100 feet or 2,164 meters above sea level, but below the Tropic of Cancer, the summers are cooler than in the southern Appalachians, and the winters in the valleys are like those in Atlanta, Georgia. Meanwhile, the higher peaks are snow-capped in the winter, like the Great Smoky Mountains. This video is part of a series of documentaries created from over 2,500 color slides and a daily journal made in Mexico in the summer of 1970 for the first Barrett Fellowship. The Barrett Fellowship was awarded annually by either the School of Architecture or the School of City and Regional Planning at the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Georgia. The mechanically operated single-lens reflex camera, Kodak Ektachrome color slide film, and Kodak automatic zoom lens color slide projector represented the state-of-the-art for architectural photography in 1970 and for 3 decades thereafter. They were used exclusively in architectural history classes until the development of the digital camera, plus digital projectors and a wide variety of graphic softwares in the early 20th century. Thus, the technology that documented the first Barrett Fellowship is totally obsolete, and the original color slides require extensive restoration before they can be digitized. These series of videos will make possible their permanent preservation for future generations of students, professionals, and hobbyists. This video, plus the color slides and drawings within the film, were created by Richard L. Thornton, registered architect. They remain his professional and intellectual property by federal law. They may not be reproduced without his permission. Commercial uses will require payment of a licensing fee. However, educational usage of this video with no advertising are both approved and encouraged. Sidney R. Barrett Sr. is one of the brilliant architects in the latter half of the 20th century whose work radically changed the appearance of metropolitan Atlanta. He was born in Albany, Georgia in 1933 during the worst days of the Great Depression. Albany is located in the southwestern part of Georgia. He received a Master of Science in Architecture from Georgia Tech in 1957. During the 1960s, he was the architect and co-developer of Executive Park, the first landscape suburban office park in the Atlanta area and one of the first in the nation. In the late 1960s, Sidney R. Barrett and Associates Architects began design work on the 27-story Coastal States Insurance Building at 260 Peachtree Street, downtown Atlanta. It is pictured above in this slide. The Coastal States Building marked the first use of mirror glass facade on a high-rise building in Atlanta. According to Sid Barrett's son, also named Sidney, his father regretted that the hard times that he grew up in prevented him from having an international exposure to architecture. He thought it very important for students and young architects to travel and study abroad. Therefore, from the profits of his professional services to the Coastal States Building, Barrett established an endowment to permanently fund a fellowship program at Georgia Tech. As initially conceived, the fellowship was annually to support independent study outside the United States for a Master of Science in Architecture or City Planning. Georgia Tech would not have a doctoral program in architecture city planning for many years to come. The announcement of the fellowship was made in early September 1969. The 1970 fellowship grant was equal to about $7,000 in 2020 dollars. In subsequent years, the fellowship was radically changed to being a small subsidy made to several students each year who wished to attend Georgia Tech's summer architecture program in Cortona, Italy. Double-digit inflation in the first 2 years of the Reagan administration, 1980 through 1982, seriously depreciated the capacity of the endowment to fund major architectural expeditions like the first fellowship. During the first half of 1969, I had done both paid graphics work and volunteer survey work for the nationally famous archaeologist, Dr. Arthur Kelly. While Kelly was mentoring me, he made a public announcement in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspaper that he had discovered artifacts along the Chattahoochee River that were made in Mexico were copies of Mexican artifacts. This announcement so angered his conservative peers that he was forced to resign from the University of Georgia in December 1969, just before I turned in my proposal for the Barrett Fellowship. My proposed research topic for the Barrett Fellowship was a comprehensive analysis of pre-Columbian architecture in Mexico and Guatemala to determine similarities to American Indian architecture in the Southeastern United States. By golly, the committee selected my proposal, but required me to take 6 courses during the winter and spring quarters to prepare me for the journey of a lifetime. In my first meeting with Dr. Ramon Piña-Chan, curator of the Museo Nacional de Antropología, he was displeased with the course syllabus for my fellowship, laid out by several Georgia Tech professors. They were primarily concerned that Georgia Tech would be assured that my funds would be spent on travel to pre-Columbian archaeological sites. A travel agent had placed me on a series of luxurious English-speaking only package tours to 7 archaeological zones that were favorite tourist attractions, nothing else. I'd be having very little interaction with everyday Mexicans, and because the cost of the package tours would only be seeing the 7 sites in about a 1-month period. Dr. Piña-Chan asked me if I wanted to be a turisto or learn about the ancient cultures of Mexico, plus also how to restore ancient structures. I answered the latter, of course. His graduate assistant, Alejandra, then created a flexible travel plan based on inexpensive bus routes, which would immerse me in the Mexican culture and then take me well over 100 archaeological sites throughout Mexico and parts of Guatemala. Michoacan is located west of Mexico City and extends southward to the Pacific Ocean. It receives considerably more rainfall than the Valley of Mexico or northern Mexico. Thus, it is greener than the Valley of Mexico or northern Mexico. It has a central spine of mountains almost impossible to cross with a bus, so it's necessary for anyone traveling to Patzcuaro to go in a loop to the north and then south again. My 217-mile or 350-kilometer journey by first-class bus to Patzcuaro from Mexico City lasted about 6 hours. The bus passed through some of the most beautiful scenery in Mexico. It's heavily forested because of the generous rainfall most of the year, but the humidity is usually low because of the extreme altitude. In a moment, you'll be able to see some of the spectacular views that I photographed along the way or while hiking around the Lake Patzcuaro Basin. The Purepecha are the largest indigenous ethnic group in Michoacan, and for many centuries have called the Lake Patzcuaro Basin their home. They are believed to be the only indigenous people in the Americas who learned how to make bronze. At the time of contact with Spanish invaders, the Purepecha were making both copper and bronze cookware, plus were fabricating a wide range of bronze weapons and tools. They won every battle that they fought with the Aztecs, so it is likely that it was eventually conquered the Aztec Empire, sooner rather than later. However, when I was studying Mexico, the Purepecha were called Tarascans. No mention was made of the word Purepecha. It turns out that the Purepecha have always called themselves the Purepecha, and that Tarascan was a pejorative name for them used by their arch enemies, the Aztecs. You now will join me in the time machine to see the spectacular views of the Sierra Madre del Sur from the ADO bus, or as I hiked around the Lake Patzcuaro Basin for a week. Accompanying the journey will be the Purepecha folk song Zizi Zapuchi, sung by Los Chinotles.
Tutsa pichu, ai chunchkar se sashito. Inskurir matar maputi, mukpari huchermin sita sandarsan kompor hawa. Ai tutsa pichu, ai chunchkar se sashito. Inskurir matar maputi, cerminsi ta sandarsan komor hawa ai kochitia pale hikinin swag matar maputi mukno masitu no puti mokunyar matar watsania tu piden aria que acabo chance pale curar cuña ay cochite pale higinis mag matar maputi mukno masitu no puti mokunyar matar watsania tu piden aria que acabo chance pale curar cuña porque tu piden aria que acabo chance pale curar cuña.
The ancient city of Patzcuaro is located 163 miles or 263 kilometers west of Mexico City in the state of Michoacan. It was founded around 1320 AD by the Purépecha people. It is considered one of the best preserved Spanish colonial towns in Mexico, despite being the scene of several major battles in the Mexican War of Independence in the early 1800s, the war against Emperor Maximilian in the mid-1860s, and the Mexican Revolution between 1910 and 1920. The town has changed very little in the previous 50 years when I visited in 1970. Since that time, its population has expanded and exploded in the suburbs, primarily from North American and European retirees. Where I walked on ancient pastures is now chic subdivisions. In 1970, Patzcuaro had a population of 14,300. The population in 2020 is approximately 60,000. Therefore, the photographs that I took in 1970 are extremely valuable for documenting the appearance of the city and surrounding landscape prior to extensive suburban development. Although the city has several church towers, the unifying central feature and social center of the town is its Zócalo, or city square. Most of the historic core of the town was planned by Italian architects according to the 1585 Law of the Indies, thus dates to the late 16th and 17th centuries. The central portion of the city is one of the best preserved colonial era historic districts in the Americas. Within the core area are several 16th century churches, monasteries, and convents that are of exceptional architectural quality. They were constructed from stones originally utilized to build Purépecha temples, palaces, and public buildings. However, there has been very little archaeological work in the central core of Patzcuaro. 3 statues in the Zócalo honor very famous figures in the history of Mexico. Gertrudis Bocanegra was a famous heroine of the Mexican War of Independence. Her full name was Maria Gertrudis Teodora Bocanegra Mendoza. She was born in 1765 and died in 1817. Bocanegra was born in Patzcuaro in what is now the Mexican state of Michoacan to Pedro Javier Bocanegra and Feliciana Mendoza. She married Lieutenant Pedro Abdicicula Lasso de la Vega, a soldier in the Spanish provincial forces of Michoacan. They had 5 daughters and 2 sons. Unusually for a woman of her time, Bocanegra had read the principal authors of the Age of Enlightenment. In some areas of Spain, that was good enough to get you burned by the Inquisition, just to read those books. When Mexico's War of Independence began, she, her husband, and eldest son joined the forces of Miguel Hidalgo y Castillo when the insurgents passed through Valladolid, now Morelia, in October 1810. Her husband and son died in the Battle of the Puente de la Carrion. She then served as a messenger for the insurgents in the region of Patzcuaro and Tacámbaro. During the guerrilla wars, she was sent to Patzcuaro to aid the rebels in the capture of the city. However, she was betrayed and taken prisoner by the Royal Army in 1817. She was subjected to torture to get her to reveal the names of other rebels, but she refused to give information to the Spaniards. Finally, she was tried and found guilty of treason. Sentenced to death, she and one of her fellow insurgents were executed on October 11th, 1817 at the Pazuelo de la San Agustin in Patzcuaro, or the Central Zocalo. Facing the firing squad, she pulled down her dress, exposing her breasts before being shot. This is the Hotel Gran, where I stayed in Patzcuaro. The building dates from the middle to early 1700s. It was converted into a hotel in around 1870. Guess what my room costs were? 25 peso or $4 a day. That included a all-you-could-eat buffet breakfast. Also had a beautiful view looking out towards the mountains, and then below me was the old marketplace. I could tell this had been a very fine room at one time. It had a cast iron grills on the balcony and the double door exit, but it had not been maintained in many, many decades. The hotel has been extensively renovated since I was there, obviously, in many different ways, but the architectural spaces of the interior and exterior dining are really the same form, dimensions as I remember, just brighter colors and brighter lights. You get a feeling what it's like to eat there. I thoroughly enjoyed staying at the hotel during the week I was in Patzcuaro. I woke up at sunrise the next morning and was surprised to sense how really chilly it was. It was in August, and yet the temperatures were no different than, say, late October, early November in the southern highlands. I looked out to the east, and there was a mountain due east of Patzcuaro Square that obviously had a calendrical function or astronomical function in the ancient days. Rain clouds rolled in just as the sun was rising up higher in the sky to get a better view of the details of the mountain, but I noticed something white on top. Do you see the white speck there? So my first project of the day was to climb that mountain and see what was on it. It was a cross. However, I strongly suspect that in the days of the Pure Petrus dominance of the region that there was some type of shrine or even a temple on top of that mountain. As the market began to stir with people, it was still chilly, perhaps in the high 40s or low 50s. Everybody in the market were wearing either men's coats or heavy wool long sleeve dresses if they were females. Here you see the cast iron grill in front of the balcony that led off my room. Notice when everyone in this photo are wearing winter clothing, including some a stocking cap, and then there's a little girl in the center of the picture who is wearing shorts. Then I turned to the right and heard music. At first I was just tuning the guitars, then all of a sudden it became real Michoacano music. As I was restoring these slides in August of 2020, I noticed something astonishing on this particular slide that I completely missed when I actually took the picture 50 years ago. Look very carefully where I have the red arrow. Notice these two men are completely ignoring the young mother who was digging her breakfast out of a garbage can. And immediately to her right is a little girl wearing a blue dress. See where the black hair and blue dress? I can't believe somebody would walk past a mother and child doing that. The sad thing was that I was headed to a all-you-can-eat breakfast buffet that I think costs $1.50 or $1.25. I would have gladly given that mother $2.50 or $5 just so she could eat, but I guess everybody's different. The churches in the historic part of Patzcuaro are just absolutely magnificent. I could do a video on any one of them. Instead, I'm going to take you on a musical tour of the remainder of the historic district. So just get a feeling what it's like to walk around Patzcuaro. It's a beautiful, beautiful town. Janitzio is the largest island in Lake Patzcuaro. There are 5 islands in Lake Patzcuaro. Janitzio is the Purépecha word, which means where it rains. It is located roughly north of the city of Patzcuaro in the center of the lake. Janitzio has probably been occupied by humans at least as long as the city of Patzcuaro, which is found around 1320 AD. The island had been an ideal location for fortifications protecting the elite of the Purépecha people. When I visited the island in August 1970, it was almost entirely occupied by traditionalist Purépecha, but already the lifestyle of its occupants had changed due to Mexican tourists taking boats to the island to visit the 130 feet tall statue of Jose Maria Morelos. Stalls lined the winding road leading to the island, whose owners sold traditional Purépecha crafts. My 1970 photographs document that there's been a major increase in both population and standard of living. A side island that was almost vegetation in 1970 is now densely covered with houses. Many of the newcomers are mestizo Purépecha rather than full-bloods. The island is known for its fishermen who are skilled at lowering their butterfly-shaped nets to catch the local cuisine pescado blanco, or white fish. It's a type of perch. The butterfly fishermen also are located on the back of the 50 peso Mexican banknote. Janitzio can only be reached by boats which nowadays run regularly back and forth for about 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m., accessible from Patzcuaro's pier, or the Embarcadero. These boats can be hired to take visitors around to other parts of the lake. The boats maintain regular schedules and take approximately 25 minutes to reach the island. A 40-meter, or 130 feet statue of Jose Maria Morelos, a great hero of Mexico's War of Independence, was constructed in 1933. It is the island's highest point. Visitors can climb to the top of the statue by way of a staircase that spirals up the inside. Along the interior walls, the life of Morelos is depicted in murals painted by Ramon Abad de la Canal and other Mexican muralists. At the top, visitors can look through peepholes to the great raised fist of Morelos, with views of the island, the lake, and surroundings. Jose Maria Morelos was born in 1765 and he was executed in 1815. He was a Mexican Roman Catholic priest and revolutionary rebel leader who led the Mexican War of Independence movement, assuming its leadership after the execution of Miguel Hidalgo de Castillo in 1811. Morelos and Ignacio Lopez Rayon are credited with organizing the War of Independence. Under Morelos, the Congress of Anahuac was installed on September 13, 1813, and in November 6 of the same year, the Mexican Congress declared the country's independence. After a series of defeats, he was captured by a Spanish royalist military, tried by the Inquisition, defrocked as a cleric, and executed by civil authorities for treason in 1815. Morelos is a national hero in Mexico and is considered a very successful military leader, despite the fact he never took a military career and instead was a priest. Zinzunzan was the ceremonial center of the Pre-Columbian Purépecha Empire. The name came from the Purépecha word Zinzunzan, which means place of the hummingbirds. The pre-Hispanic city of Zinzunzan extended from Lake Patzcuaro to the hills just to the east and had a population of between 25,000 and 30,000 people when the Spanish arrived in the 1520s. After being in Patzcuaro for the first years of the Purépecha Empire, the royal power was consolidated in Zinzunzan in the mid-15th century. The empire continued to grow and hold off attacks by the neighboring Aztec Empire until the Spanish arrived. Horrific smallpox and measles epidemics had greatly reduced the population of the capital city and nearby towns before the Spanish arrived. The emperor had died in this epidemic. He was replaced by an inexperienced young man. Not wanting to suffer the destruction experienced by the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the Purépecha emperor surrendered to the Spanish. Eventually, much of the site, especially its distinct 5 rounded pyramids called yacatas, were destroyed and the city almost completely abandoned. The treacherous Spanish burned the young emperor of the state anyway in order to terrorize the Purépecha population. Due to lack of interest in the old Purépecha dominion by archaeologists, excavation of this site did not begin until the 1930s. Its largest structures are the 5 Yacata pyramids, which line up looking out over Lake Patzcuaro. They've been substantially reconstructed. The other is the large grand platform excavated into the hillside on which the Yacatas and other buildings rest. or did rest. Today the site is still used for events such as the Festo Cultural de Fin de Año, or New Year's Day. Much of the Purepecha culture is very distinct from other Mesoamerican cultures. The Purepecha language has more in common with Zuni in the southwestern United States and Quechua in Peru than any other language. It is unrelated to any other Mesoamerican language that we know of. Geronimo de Alcala's collection of stories from Purepecha elders states that these people migrated to the Lake Patzcuaro region, developing alliances among the peoples who were already there. They did not conquer the area. Eventually, they became the dominant group and established the city of Zinzunzan to make it its capital. According to the collected evidence, the Purepecha people may have begun to dominate the Patzcuaro Lake area as early as 1000 AD, but definitely by 1250 AD. Zinzunzan was made the first capital of the new Spanish province of Michoacan in the 1520s, and Franciscan friars arrived here to evangelize the Purepecha people. Their monastery complex was built in part from the stones taken from the 5 Yucata pyramids at the ceremonial center. By the 1530s, the capital had been moved to Patzcuaro, and Zinzunzan's population plummeted until it was almost abandoned by the end of the century. The structural details of the Purepecha public buildings are extremely different than any other else in Mexico. Notice the backfill is a kind of rubble, typical of what we might find elsewhere in Mexico or even in the American Southwest, but they're covered with a veneer of finely shaped rectangular stones. This is just not seen in Mexico. It is seen some places in Peru, but not common there. These are 2 examples of ceramic models of elite houses. Note they're built on top of platforms with steps about 3 feet high. This is an example of Pre-Columbian Purepecha pottery, probably made by a commoner. It might be a little bit more detailed for elite, but not terribly different in design. This is the town of Zinzunzan, which had a population around 3,400 when I took the photograph in 1970. Its current population is around 13,000. It's grown quite a bit. So most of the land you see in the foreground probably is now houses. This is a hilltop above Zinzunzan where was located the royal tombs. It had been severely damaged by grave diggers and artifact collectors. The government at that time was in the process of re-establishing forests there. Well, I have some bad news and some good news. The bad news is this is the last photograph ever made by my Olympus camera, which I bought when I started off at Georgia Tech. What happened was I was photographing the lake from behind this wall and I heard snorting in the background. I turned around and saw 3 large black bulls. First, the big bull pushed back the other smaller bulls and I thought I was okay. Then just after I took this photograph, I saw a big black bull charging at me. I thought I was a goner. I made one last flying leap over the rock wall, totally destroying my camera in the process, landing in a mud puddle on the other side with my blue jeans completely split end to end. I had to walk back down the mountainside to Zinzunzan to catch a bus with holding my pants together with my left hand. The first and second class bus drivers would not let me on the bus. I was so filthy. A third class driver did let me on the bus, but maybe sit with the chickens and the pigs. And there I sat for 11 miles and all the Purepecha Indians staring at me and said, "What sort of creature is that?" When I got to the hotel in Patzcuaro, the man looked at me at the desk and said, "You know this is a hotel." And I tried to explain in English that I had had an accident, but he eventually let me into my room. The only thing I had left to wear when I rode the bus back to Mexico City were my shorts, which gave a thrill to all the senoritas in the bus because the Mexican men didn't wear shorts. And now the good news. When I got home, there were a whole bunch of birthday cards for me because it was my 21st birthday in 2 days. I had sent photographs that I'd taken from the top of the mountain overlooking Teotihuacan, 10,000 feet, and it sent it to a lot of relatives and friends. Well, by golly, They really appreciated that photograph. They were totally impressed, and I got a huge amount of money in the mail, in money orders and traveler's checks, things like that. It was enough to buy me a first-class Minolta camera. And so from now on this journey in Mexico, you'll notice an increased quality of the photographs, especially in limited lighting. This Olympus was no good in low light conditions. Well, that's the end of the journey in Michoacan. We'll see you next in Oaxaca.